All right. Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Ready when you are. Always love these explorations.
Me too. And, for anyone tuning into the deep dive for the first time, this is where we take whatever material you're curious about and we really get into it. Today, we're diving into the core ideas from Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life.
Right on. We've got some excerpts here, and they lay out like the very foundation of her thinking. It's all about this powerful connection she sees between, that inner world of thoughts and beliefs we all have and how those actually shape the outer experiences of our lives.
So for you listening, our aim in this deep dive is to pull out like the most impactful insights from Hay's whole philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Give you a fresh perspective maybe on how to really take charge of your own experience using, get this, the power of your own mind.
Absolutely.
Now, a really important note here, and Hay emphasizes this too, this is not about medical advice at all. We're exploring these general concepts about emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, just as she presents them in her work.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So as we get into these early chapters, you'll come across like Hay's core foundational beliefs. And right off the bat, she puts it out there. We are responsible for everything that happens in our lives.
Okay, hold on. Responsibility for everything. It's a pretty big idea to swallow.
It is. And it links directly to her second key point, which is the idea that every single thought we have is actively creating our future. It's like our internal world is constantly shaping our external reality.
It's giving. Manifest your reality.
It is kind of like that.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Think of it like planting seeds, right? So negative thoughts, those are like planting weeds in your mental garden. They're just going to sprout up unless you make the choice to plant something different, something more beautiful,
Right.
Yeah.
And she's big on this point too, that the power to shift those thoughts, to make those choices, it's right here, right now. It's in the present moment.
Yeah.
It's not about dwelling on the past,
Yeah.
but about the thoughts and beliefs you're carrying right this second.
Exactly. What I find fascinating is how she observes that beneath like so many of the problems we face, there's this core feeling, almost like I'm not good enough, And it's crazy how many people resonate with that, right? What do you think? Like, what are some of the societal pressures that really contribute to that almost universal feeling of inadequacy?
That's a great question. I mean, it seems like we're hit with messages constantly from, the media we consume, from even casual conversations, like subtly or sometimes not so subtly, telling us we need to be different, better, more something. So feeling not good enough can almost start to feel, well, normal.
Right.
But Hay offers this, I don't know, really empowering counterpoint to all that, doesn't she?
100%. Her message boils down to this. Our thoughts are not set in stone. We can change them.
Okay.
It's not like you're stuck. It's just we have to redirect our energy mentally.
I want something to really grab your attention. Early on in the book, Hay throws out this idea, might surprise some folks, and she says, we actually choose our parents. Yeah, suggesting that it's to learn specific life lessons. It's definitely thought-provoking, and it really sets the stage for her whole philosophy of personal responsibility.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
Let's dig a little deeper into that, into the power of thought, the power of belief.
Yeah.
Hay's pretty clear, she says, whatever we believe about ourselves eventually hardens into our personal truth. And that shapes how we experience reality. We create these self-fulfilling prophecies that we often mistake for just like objective truth.
So like if your inner monologue is constantly saying people are out to get me,
yeah,
you're going to interpret everything through that lens.
Exactly. You might become super cautious, see hostile intentions where there are none, and even without realizing it, attract situations that seem to prove your suspicions right.
Right.
But on the other hand, let's say your dominant thought is more like, everyone is always helpful. You're going to have a completely different experience, You'd be more open to help. You'd notice kind gestures you might have missed before, and you might even act in ways that encourage others to be helpful toward you. The key here is that the universe, or whatever you want to call it, seems to mirror back the beliefs that we consistently hold.
Gotcha. So it's not like there's some judgmental force out there, like
Yeah.
rewarding good thoughts and punishing bad ones.
Not at all. Hay describes the subconscious mind as just accepting whatever we choose to believe. No questions asked. Imagine your subconscious as this huge library, storing all your past experiences, your beliefs, everything. And it acts like this filter, often prioritizing info that confirms what you already believe. This is why changing those deep-seated patterns, it takes real effort.
Effort and awareness, I bet.
Right.
So if I'm getting this right, We basically have unlimited choices when it comes to our thoughts. And it seems like the logical move is to start choosing the thoughts that actually serve us.
You got it. Why hold on to a thought that brings you fear, that isolates you, when you can choose one that brings connection, support? And Hay makes this great point. She says, the universal power never judges or criticizes. It just reflects back to us how we're valuing ourselves through our beliefs.
That's a powerful way to think about it.
Yeah.
So if I'm stuck in the belief that I'm lonely and unloved, well, I'm basically sending that message out, and that's what's going to show up in my life.
Exactly. But the moment, the very instant, you're willing to let go of that belief and start affirming something different, like love surrounds me, I am loving and lovable, and you keep nurturing that affirmation, well, that starts to become your reality. You start to see the love that might have been there all along, and you become more open to receiving more.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at where these negative beliefs actually come from in the first place, right?
Yeah.
We're not born thinking, I'm not good enough, are we?
Not at all. Hay's perspective is that we learn how to feel about ourselves, how to see the world through the adults around us when we're kids. It's like that early environment, that's the training ground for our most basic beliefs.
So if a child grows up in a home where, let's say, the adults are constantly unhappy, maybe struggling with fear, guilt, anger,
Yeah.
well, they're picking up on that. They're learning that the world is a scary, maybe a negative place.
Exactly. And they may even start to believe that they are the cause of that negativity or that they don't deserve to be happy.
Right.
They internalize messages like, I never do anything right, or it's my fault when things go wrong. Maybe they even learn to suppress their emotions, thinking like, if I get angry, that makes me a bad person. Those early impressions, they can really set the stage for a life filled with, self-doubt, frustration.
Yeah. And Hay even links this to our adult relationships, doesn't she? She says we have this tendency to recreate the emotional atmosphere of our childhood homes, even if it wasn't healthy.
Yeah. It's like we're drawn to what feels familiar. It's like it's our comfort zone, even if it's not actually comfortable.
Exactly. And it's interesting. We might find ourselves attracted to partners or even bosses who kind of mirror the dynamics we had with our parents or that our parents had with each other. It's this deep internal sense of home, even if that home was chaotic or negative.
Right, right.
And even more powerful is the idea that we often end up treating ourselves the way our parents treated us. So if you grew up with a lot of criticism, you might become your own worst critic as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
You almost hear those old voices, right? But the good news is, if you were loved and encouraged as a child, you're more likely to treat yourself with that same kindness.
Now, it'd be easy to just blame our parents for all of this. But Hay doesn't go there, does she?
No, she takes a really compassionate approach. She points out that our parents were also, in their own way, victims of victims. They were just passing on the lessons they'd learned,
Right.
If they didn't understand self-love, they couldn't teach it to us. They were doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. And she even suggests that, trying to understand our parents' childhoods, listening to their stories with an open heart, it can help us see where their fears and patterns came from. It's like breaking the cycle of blame and replacing it with understanding.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings us to this important point, right? The power to change any of this doesn't lie in the past. It's here in the present moment.
Right, right.
So we've seen how early experiences shape our beliefs. But the beauty of Hay's work is that the past doesn't have to control our future. Let's talk about why that present moment is so key.
I'm ready.
All right.
So Hay really emphasizes that all those past experiences, the negative patterns that feels so stuck.
Well, they were created by the thoughts and beliefs we held in the past.
Exactly. They're the result of how we were talking to ourselves, what we believed yesterday, last year, maybe even decades ago.
Yeah.
But the important thing is the past is over. It's done. What matters is what you, the listener, are choosing to think, believe, say right now. Because those thoughts, those words, they're creating your future experiences. So right this second, as you're listening, that's where your power lies.
Yeah. It's the point where you can start making different choices, conscious choices that can lead to a different future. Hay even suggests just pausing, taking a moment to notice your thoughts. Are they mostly positive or are they mostly negative? Is that the mental landscape you want to create your tomorrow from?
And this leads us to another one of Hay's big ideas, right? That the only thing we're ever really dealing with is a thought. And thoughts, they can be changed.
Absolutely.
So no matter how huge, how overwhelming a problem seems, it's really just an outer expression of some inner thought pattern.
Yeah.
Even something as heavy as self-hatred.
Even that, she says self-hatred isn't some flaw we're born with. It's actually us disliking a thought that we have about ourselves. Like you might have the thought, I'm a bad person, right? And that thought creates all these negative feelings. We start to identify with those feelings as if they're who we are.
But if we can change the thought, the feeling starts to fade away. That's pretty powerful when you think about it.
It is. And she's clear that we shouldn't use this as an excuse to stay stuck in our pain. The past has no power over us now. No matter how long a pattern's been running, we have the power to interrupt it right here, right now. It's about recognizing that we can choose to be free.
She also says something interesting about choice. She says even the negative thoughts that feel automatic, they were still a choice we made at some point.
Exactly. We might have repeated a thought so many times it feels like a reflex now, but at some point we started that pattern. And if we could make that choice back then, well, we can choose something different now. We can refuse to engage with that negative self-talk.
This takes us back to that core belief we talked about earlier, that feeling of, I'm not good enough.
Right. And Hay believes this is like the root belief for almost everyone. It shows up in different ways. Sometimes it's, I don't do enough or I don't deserve.
And it's so easy to see how that belief can sabotage us, right?
Yeah.
If you don't believe you're worthy, how can you fully embrace love, joy, success when they come your way?
Yeah, it creates this inner conflict. You might constantly feel like you haven't achieved enough or that you don't really deserve good things. And then we end up sabotaging ourselves, which just reinforces the belief. It's like a vicious cycle.
It really is. Now, Hay also calls out a few specific emotions that she sees as major causes of problems in our lives and even in our bodies.
She does. She talks about resentment, criticism, guilt, and fear. And she sees these as stemming from blaming others instead of taking responsibility.
So if we own the idea that we're responsible for our experiences, well, then there's no one to blame.
Right. And look, she's not condoning bad behavior from others, but she suggests that our beliefs are like magnets. If you believe you're always being criticized or taken advantage of, you might unconsciously attract people who'll do just that. But as those beliefs shift, your experiences tend to shift too.
It's like you stop playing the victim role.
Yeah.
And she even connects these emotions to specific physical things, right? Like resentment could lead to cancer.
She does. She proposes that, holding on to resentment for a long time, it could contribute to cancer. Habitual criticism might lead to arthritis. Guilt, she says, often shows up as physical pain. And then fear and all that tension that comes with it, well, she connects that to things like baldness, ulcers, even sore feet. It's a very holistic view of the mind-body connection.
That connection she makes between resentment and cancer, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is. And Hay acknowledges that it might sound a little too simple for some people, but she says, based on her experience and what she's observed, she's seen how forgiving, truly letting go of that resentment can actually lead to, the dissolution of cancer. It's central to her belief system.
So forgiveness is a big deal here.
It's huge. She's adamant that we can't change the past, but we can change how we feel about it. We can stop punishing ourselves in the present for things that are over and done.
She has a really strong image. She talks about dissolving resentment now when it's smaller, instead of waiting until it becomes a huge crisis.
Right, because when we're in that panic mode, it's way harder to focus on healing. And a big part of releasing the past, according to Hay, is being willing to forgive everyone who's hurt us, even ourselves.
So even if we don't know how to forgive, even if we don't feel like it.
Even then, she suggests that just stating your intention, just saying, I'm willing to forgive, that starts the process. It's for our own good that we let go of that baggage and embrace forgiveness.
Okay.
She even offers a specific affirmation, and I think this is really helpful. I forgive you for not being the way I wanted you to be. I forgive you, and I set you free.
And this is about us letting go, not about them.
Exactly. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden.
Now, she also talks about an idea from A Course in Miracles, about what causes all disease.
That's right. The Course says all disease comes from a state of unforgiveness. And Hay adds to that. She says the person we find hardest to forgive, well, that's the person we need to let go of the most.
It's important to be clear, though. Forgiveness doesn't mean saying that what happened was okay, right? That's crucial.
Absolutely. Forgiveness, in Hay's view, is about letting go of the anger, the resentment, the pain. It doesn't mean condoning the action. It's about reclaiming your own inner peace.
Gotcha.
And again, she says, you don't need to know how to forgive. The willingness is what matters. The how, that'll come.
Like that.
And she encourages us to remember that those we need to forgive, they were probably hurting too, They were doing their best with what they knew at the time, even if it was messed up.
It's about having compassion, even
Yeah.
when it's hard.
Yeah. And all of this leads back to what Hay sees as the key, like the master key, to solving so many of our problems, whether it's physical health, money troubles, relationships, even feeling blocked creatively.
And that key is loving ourselves.
Exactly. She says that when we truly love ourselves, when we accept ourselves fully, when we approve of ourselves just as we are right now, life starts to flow, things get easier. She even says little miracles are everywhere.
And she links self-love to some pretty tangible things, like better health, more abundance, more fulfilling relationships, being more creative.
Right. She says, when we love ourselves, we take better care of our bodies, which leads to better health. We feel worthy of good things, so we attract more abundance. Our relationships thrive because we're not desperate for validation, and our creativity flows because we're not weighed down by self-doubt.
And she makes a point that really resonates with me. She says that people who love and accept themselves, they're way less likely to hurt themselves or others.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So self-approval, accepting yourself right here, right now, those are the keys to unlocking positive change in all areas of life, according to Hay.
And she says that self-love starts with a really simple, but often really hard choice. Choosing to never criticize yourself.
Right. Because when we criticize ourselves, we're just feeding those negative patterns we're trying to break free from.
It's adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah. So instead of criticism, she's all about understanding, gentleness, compassion towards ourselves. We've probably spent years being our own worst enemies, and that clearly hasn't worked. So she's suggesting a new approach. Approving of ourselves. See what happens when we do that.
And she ends that first chapter with some pretty powerful affirmations.
She does. She affirms, in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. It's like acknowledging that we're inherently okay, just as we are.
And then she talks about believing in this greater power, a force that flows through all of us.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we're not alone, we're connected to something bigger, and there's this wisdom, this support that's always available to us. She encourages us to tap into that inner wisdom, recognizing the presence of this one intelligence that's everywhere.
And to trust that this power will provide us with answers, solutions, healing, whatever we need at the right time in the right way.
It's about surrendering to something larger than ourselves, having faith in its goodness. And she ends with this affirmation that's so simple, but so powerful. All is well in my world.
So to wrap up our deep dive into these foundational ideas from Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life, we explored the power of our thoughts and beliefs, the importance of being aware of those thoughts in this present moment, the need to deal with those feelings of not being good enough, the damage that resentment and criticism can do, and ultimately, the transformative power of forgiveness for ourselves and others, and, at the core of it all, self-love.
And it's worth repeating, listener, these are concepts for you to explore, to nourish your emotional and spiritual well-being. They're not meant to replace medical advice.
Right. Always good to remember that.
Yeah.
And to leave you with something to think about. Just imagine how even one tiny conscious change in your self-talk today could start to shift your experiences tomorrow. Is there one negative thought, maybe something we touched on today, that you'd be willing to, gently question? Maybe even let go of.
Something to ponder.
Exactly. Until next time, keep diving.
See you in the next one.
Take care.